Welcome to video A6. We have two sort of simple, at least one simple drawing here that we're going to work on, and this is going to be these knuckles of the hand. Right here is this top one, and we've got the end of the whetstone here by the wrist is the bottom one. So we're going to get started. I'm going to start out with my number 2 pencil. Make sure it's nice and sharp. We're going to look at the articulation points. So we want to go over just a little bit here. Got some blank space here. This we can go directly across. And then I'm going to say, okay, where does this knuckle come down? Where does this knuckle come down? And then here, let's see, we can go straight across here. Actually, let's do this crease and this. Okay. So we're coming very close to the end. The next one of these is very simple. And then we'll be ready to put this all together. And they're gonna look great. I'm excited to see them. So we're gonna lay in some value here. We've got value all across this section of knuckles. So I just wanna show that here. And then this is white. So I'm gonna have to soften this edge, make a soft edge. And then here we have a pretty distinct edge between this finger and this section of finger here. And we got a little bit of shading here. Okay, so I know this is going to be a dark value. So I'm going to switch pencils here. And okay, I think we have a basic layout. I'm going to take out a 4B. This is already sharp. I'm gonna look at this relationship right here between my darkest dark and then a medium dark here. So I wanna get this shape right. This shape connects into this contour. So I'm gonna show myself that. Then I wanna look over here. Now this needs to be a soft edge eventually, but I need to know where am I gonna stop my darkest value. So let's lay that in there to start to get some relative value. I'm not entirely happy with this shape that I drew. Seems a little leaner than I had it, so. I'm always flicking my eyes back and forth. And if you're having trouble with pressure And it's just really tempting to put a lot of pressure down here. Lean more of your weight on your actual hand. See if that helps. I had to sharpen this. I thought it was sharp. Now, different artists hold their pencils different ways, but I mostly hold it about the same way I would if I were going to write. But whatever gives you control over the amount of pressure. So if you want to like choke back on the pencil and use a lighter, more feathery touch, you could do that. But my idea in you watching me draw is that you are able to imitate me. Because that can be helpful as you're trying to figure out what works for you. And if the whole world is open, you can get decision fatigue. So just hold your pencil like a normal writing pencil. Unless you want to temporarily experiment with something else. So at about this point in the drawing, often I'm saying to myself, oh, you know, this is going to be a lot of work to get this to look like this. And even though we have to keep the whole thing in mind in order to accurately lay these values in and consider the edges and the composition, we also can just say, I'm going to take this one little step at a time. I'm going to make one decision at a time. And then before you know it, you have a drawing. And then the drawing is over. So if you're feeling like it's a long trek to the end, break it down just like you would any other task and say, okay, well, I'm just going to do this first and then see how I feel. Okay, I think I could do this part next and then see how I feel. Okay, this is going to be a darker value, so I'm going to lay off here and switch to a 6B, I think. I want this to be a nice dark value. And I'm going to just work with this edge a little bit. Not a lot of pressure. I want everything to be erasable. And I want everything to blend in here. So here's a nice dark area, and you see this triangular edge here. Okay. My 6B is completely broken. I'm going to sharpen that to a point and get back in here. And I'm just building up value. So that's what makes this one relatively simple, is that we just have to do the work of layering. Okay, this knuckle is darker than this section. So where these two hit each other, we got two edges of value butting up against each other, and I want to make sure that this one is noticeably darker because that's going to help me define this shape. And I don't want to press hard. Just want to make layers. Okay, I'm gonna go with a B. I'm gonna try to feather this edge in a little bit. And then I'm gonna work on this light area, and then we're about done. And just like that, we have a drawing, even though it seemed difficult at first. And clean up these edges. Okay, this is darker than this. So we've got a highlight area there. We want to avoid putting a lot of pencil down there. be enough with that. I'm not sure I have this shape quite right here. This comes in and narrows a little bit more than what I have. Then we've got this dark shadowed edge here that bleeds into the shadow. We have it. I've got a dark spot here I want to get rid of. Okay. We're going to move on to this one. And we can look at the negative space here as well as where these marks meet the edge of the paper. And again, if you're having trouble making these dark marks, then lean more on your hand to try to compensate for that. Try to tempt yourself away from leaning on your pencil, because I want to be able to erase all of this. I don't feel certain at all that this is what I want ultimately the shape to be. I've got to get some marks in here and make comparisons. I'm looking for intersection points. I've got this medium area that I'm going to draw in here. I'm going to look at where does this dark area end, and then I've got again a crease. We've seen this before, this crease where the skin buckles as it folds. Okay, so I'm looking at, I've got this knuckle here. Maybe it's wrong, but that's my comparison point. And then I'm looking here. Where is the relationship between this little wrinkle in the skin? Where's the knuckle in relationship to this triangle? This all ends before we get to this tip of the knife. Okay, and this curves up and over. And then we're going to come at this from the other side, and that's going to help us know how accurate we were on this side. Is everything matching up? Kind of. Okay, and this last finger, I want to look at the negative space. Where are the intersection points? And I'm going to treat the shadow as a shape. I'm going to figure out where it is. Okay, so then I'm going to show myself where are the shadows and shades, and where are the highlights, and that's going to give me immediately some information that I can use to make relative decisions about value, edges, shape, all the things. Okay, so we're gonna lay this in. This comes down here. I've got a bunch of lines here because I wasn't sure. This is kind of light, the way it comes around here. This is definitely, if not my darkest dark, close to darkest dark. So I'm gonna use a different pencil for that. Okay, and then got cast shadows in all these areas. And okay. Now I want to really look at this. Okay, I'm using a 4B. You might recognize my pencils at this point, but this is a 4B. And this edge isn't entirely hard, so I'm going to come back to this as I darken this and work on this edge to make it ever so soft. Okay, I'm constantly looking back and forth. This isn't the hardest of edges, but it's fairly defined. This one's softer. This edge here, where it comes down, is softer than this edge over here. I want to keep that in mind as I'm shading. And again, it seems like a lot of drawing here, but we're gonna just choose one area at a time. I'm gonna pay attention to this edge that goes from mostly hard to mostly soft. And this contrast is going to add interest, but also information about how the light is falling on these fingers, where it is in relationship to the fingers. And you see there I've got a light area right here. I want to preserve that next to this relatively dark area. I'm going to go back to my B for this. And then everything around this is going to be dark. And it's going to really show that that light is hitting the side of that finger. In an interesting way. Okay, for these edges that are softer and lighter, I need to switch pencils again. So I'm going to go back here to this dark area. I don't want to fall into the grooves of my other shading, so I'm going to constantly be changing my pencil direction. I'm gonna look at this shape. have to switch to a 6B here because these shadows are very dark. So I'll go in here. I don't want to go this dark. Over here. I'm going to switch to a lighter pencil for that section. Okay, this isn't long enough. Look at that. I need this part of the finger to come over further. Okay, that's all. Okay. So the drawing is starting to emerge. I'm going to go to a 2B here. Over here on the wrist, I've got some medium grays. So I've got a nice sharp pencil. Especially when I start in on a section like this, I want to look again at my shapes. Is it accurate? And I think 2B is too dark. Let's switch to B. There's my B. I've got a little bit of darkness here. I'm going to put that in. Some lightness here I want to maintain. All right, let me grab my 6B. And I'm going to work with these relative values here. Too dark. Okay, I'm gonna go to my number 2. I'm getting close. This is where I start to see the drawing emerge. Okay, so we've got these values in here. We still have this little bit of lightness right here. There's some dark down here. This is a very soft edge, and then this is a mistake line, so I want a construction line. I guess maybe we used it for something. this nice soft transition edge here. And another one over here. And the way I shade this can be somewhat linear to show where the skin of this knuckle is curving. I've got a tiny bit of shade here, tiny bit of shade here. And I'm definitely going to have to go in with my 6B here to get this darkness. And then I've got some construction lines here that I want to get rid of. Okay, I'm getting closer. And this is a soft transition here between medium value and lighter. Okay, now we're gonna lay in these darkest darks and be really close to finished with this drawing. It's too dark. I'm gonna switch to a 2B to make this curve. And then we'll go back in here. The definition between the fingers or the finger and the whetstone gets really lost in this deep shadow. So I'm going to try to depict this as it is, rather than trying to define something here that I can't see. And I'm turning my pencil a little bit to maximize the amount of sharpness I can get out of my pencil. I've got some bumps here I want to get rid of. Now I talked about this as a slightly soft edge. Slightly. Got some construction lines to get rid of here. Here. All right, and then just like that, we pretty much have a drawing. see you for the last one.